perspective. If this war is going to cost tens or hundreds of thousands of Iraqi lives if everybody grants their will, the Iraqi people need that kind of liberation like they need another hole in their head. So those are two things that I wanted to remind you. Thanks very much.
What do we want? What do we want? What do we want? When do we want it? Our next speaker will be Alex Simon, Professor of Sociology here at U.V.S.C.
First thing I'd like to say that if you do believe that this conflict is about democracy, if you do believe it's about national security, I would suggest that you get a tuition reimbursement. We're not doing our job. Then I agree that it is about oil. In 2001, the Cheney report came out, and it said that half of our oil in the year 2000 was imported. By the year 2020, we're going to have to import 2/3 of our oil. Most of that will have to come from the Persian Gulf. A quarter of the world's oil reserves are sitting in Saudi Arabia. The second nation that has most oil is Iraq. So we're looking at 112 million barrels of oil in reserve. We would definitely like to get our hands on this oil. The problem about this is Bush and Cheney cannot tell the truth. So what are they supposed to say? You've got to go out, you've got to kill thousands of Iraqi civilians, we've got to place young men and young women in danger from our military for the sake of ExxonMobil? I mean, that's probably not going to go over all that well. Are you going to say, young man, I want you to go out and I want you to die so middle-aged men can drive Humvees? That's not going to go over well. And so they have to say, well, he is a threat to our national security. We want to bring democracy and peace to Iraq. I don't know why people don't laugh when the U.S. talks about bringing democracy to the Middle East. Anyone who is vaguely familiar with American history knows that we have a long history of subverting democracy in the Middle East, Latin America, and elsewhere. What is our problem with Saddam Hussein? Yes, he is a brutal dictator. Yes, he has used chemical weapons against his own people. We didn't have a problem with that back in the 1980s. He used to be our brutal dictator. He was our boy. His problem was he became a dictator that the U.S. could not control. And so when Kuwait did slant drilling into Iraq, stealing their oil, you know, they thought maybe he'd go over there and take over an oil well or something. He took over the whole country. So when we have one of our dictators overthrowing another one of our dictators in Kuwait, we get upset, right? Because that's unstable. We've got to keep the flow of oil coming. And so all of a sudden he's a problem. So that we, and if you look at support of dictators, the most brutal fundamentalist Islamic regime in the world, now the Taliban's gone, is Saudi Arabia. They have been our brutal fundamentalist Islamic regime since the end of World War II. Basically, you can do whatever you want to your own people, you can behead them, etc., torture them like the Saudis do, as long as you do what you're told with your foreign policy. Now, the other thing is that we're going to somehow protect American people by invading Iraq. I would propose that we are placing American people in harm's way. Obviously, you send troops in, they're in harm's way. But if you want to recruit for Al-Qaeda, if you want to, as Noam Chomsky said, answer Osama bin Laden's prayers, what you do is you start bombing a country with a lot of Muslims in it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Alex. Our next speaker will be Brian Birch from the Philosophy Department and the acting director of the Center for the Study of Ethics.
All right, Brian!
First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of this rally for their efforts, Dennis Potter, Chris Weigel, Nancy Rushford, and others. I would like to address my remarks to those of you who are undecided regarding whether or not aggression against Iraq is the best course of action. On the one hand, you may consider yourself a patriotic defender of American ideals. On the other hand, you may recently have heard religious leaders telling us that we should seek peaceful solutions whenever possible. You may wonder whether opposing the Bush administration's effort to wage war is to be less than a patriotic American. Nothing could be further from the truth, and the irony of such rhetoric is shown in the fact that people on both sides of the political spectrum oppose the federal government in certain cases. So to say that being opposed to a war is tantamount to being opposed to the government is merely empty propaganda. The issue is not whether you support or oppose the government, but whether you support or oppose the government in this case. There are many reasons to oppose unilateral military action by the United States. First, we have not convinced the United Nations that war is necessary. And you can rest assured that they know a lot more about Saddam Hussein's capabilities regarding weapons of mass destruction than we do. In fact, we have not even convinced our closest allies that war is necessary. And their interests and our interests are intimately tied up with one another. Second, and most importantly in my view, is that this would serve as a preemptive strike that meets almost no criterion for a just war, for the justification for war. According to most just war theories, there must be clear and direct provocation. All other means of putting an end to the conflict must be exhausted, and the war cannot produce evils greater than the evil to be eliminated. I would maintain that an invasion of Iraq meets none of these criteria. In fact, it lowers the bar for war to dangerous levels that could serve to destabilize the world in coming generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I just wanted to read another quote. You might think, well, the peaceful solutions have been exhausted. Other people might disagree. Here's one person, Russell M. Nelson, says, because of the long history of hostility upon the earth, many feel that peace is beyond hope. I disagree. Peace is possible. We can learn to love our fellow human beings throughout the world, whether they be Jewish, Islamic, or fellow Christians, whether Hindu, Buddhist, or other. We can live together with mutual admiration and respect without forsaking our religious convictions. Things we have in common are greater than our differences. Peace is a prime priority that pleads for our pursuit. Old Testament prophets held out hope, and so should we. The psalmist said, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Our next speaker will be Lynn Bennett, Professor of History and co-organizer of this rally.
Hi, I'd like to thank the organizers, and not just myself, for organizing this. And for those of you that are stopping today, thank you, because this is not a done deal. In fact, today we've learned that the Senate probably will not contemplate voting on this issue, this resolution, until next week. So you do have time to act if you act now. I'm actually a commercial break. I'm going to ask you to pick up one of these handbills that are being circulated in the quad, and I want you to, well, obviously pay attention to the Stop This War message, but I want you to know that if you do not believe that conflict is an answer to our problems,